All right, Alexander, we have to talk about Biden's handling of inflation. It's not transitory, and it is not going down, it is going up. And I also have the sneaking suspicion that the latest numbers we have are really downplaying it as well. They're actually trying to cover for the fact that it's much higher than what the Biden White House is putting out there. But you'll get into that. We also have some new approval numbers for Biden, and they are freaking awful. I mean, awful. We're talking a train wreck. One of those numbers is that the polling numbers found that 28% of Americans approved of Biden's handling of inflation, while a majority of Americans, 69%, disapprove. Who the hell are the 28% that approve? Let's see, on gun violence, let's see, Americans disapprove of Biden handling that, 32%. 36% of Americans approve of his handling on crime, while 61% disapprove. I'm shocked that 36% actually approve. And let me just get the numbers on the COOF and that nasty Greek Omicron letter. And it says here that, and I'm reading this from USA Today, Alexander, these numbers. It says that Biden took a significant hit in Americans' faith in his handling of the pandemic, with a majority of Americans, 53%, still approving of Biden's response, while 45% disapprove, marking the most since he took office, and a nearly 20% drop from March, when his approval was 72% for the COOF. So it's just an implosion.
Yeah, I mean, the last point, the approval for the COOF, is just positive, but bear in mind how important that issue became during the election. So the fact that his support there is imploding, is collapsing, even on that issue, is serious news for him. Now, on the economy, I mean, he is completely underwater. And I understand that this is the fastest decline in a president's poll ratings since Harry Truman took over from FDR in the 1940s. I mean, this is a collapse, and obviously he has the continuing, I suspect, grudging support of part of the Democratic Party's core vote. I mean, you talked about, the 28% who approve on, what I think was inflation, and the 36% who approve on crime issues and those sort of things. So, I mean, there is that core vote that is still there. But to be absolutely clear about it, I mean, they support him because they're Democrats and he's a Democrat president. They probably don't have any great sense of enthusiasm for him. If we go back to Donald Trump, there were times when, his poll ratings and disapproval rating looked difficult, but his support base was not only high, it was enthusiastic for him. So, I mean, there is that difference in dynamic which one shouldn't overlook. Now, look at the situation today, and it becomes immediately obvious why this is. We have a president who barely communicates except in scripted terms, who doesn't project an appearance of authority. We have an inflation which is now rising, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the official number is 6.8% in November. I'm absolutely sure that the reality is that it's much higher than that. Some people say in double digits. I'm not going to do all the sums. I mean, it's always a question of statistics, but I'm sure it's higher than the 6.8% that people are saying. And all the indications are that it's rising. I mean, the inflation curve is rising. You have a crime epidemic, a violent crime epidemic, which is out of control in many US cities, especially, dare I say it, cities run by the Democratic Party. Just saying. We have a crisis on the border, which of course the media doesn't want to talk about, but which is completely out of control. And of course, beyond all of that, we have all kinds of problems in foreign policy. We have a debacle in Afghanistan. We have a crisis in Europe, which there appear to be no clear options, in which the president is unable to communicate clearly what his policies and intentions are. So overall, the fact that this administration is collapsing, the fact that the approval ratings of the president are collapsing, are no surprise. The only thing I think that is still working for him is the fact that his vice president is even more widely disliked than he is.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. The fact that Kamala Harris is not doing any better, probably a lot worse, is the only thing that's keeping Joe Biden in office. The fact they just don't have a replacement. They floated around Buttigieg, and Americans are pretty much rejecting him as well. No big surprise there. Real quick, there's also one other rating, which is just the overall his handling of the economic recovery. 41% of Americans are approving his handling in December compared to 47% in October. Disapproval of the way he's handling the economy. 57% of Americans surveyed disapproved of his handling of the economy compared to 53% in October. So, I mean, the two most important issues, which is the economy. It's always the economy, stupid, as they say during elections. And the second issue, which is the coup, the only issue that the Democrats had some sort of favorable response to, is collapsing as well. I mean, they've got to do something quick. The Democrats, they've got to do something quick, or else it's just, okay, 2022, I think they've already accepted the fact they're just going to get slaughtered. If they don't do something quick, 2024 is just going to be maybe a replay of Reagan, Carter, or something like that.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. Can I just say, first of all, I mean, nobody should be surprised about any of this. I mean, we are on the Duran. We do our programs. We work hard. We read all the numbers and things, but we don't have, obviously, the kind of resources that the President of the United States is supposed to have. The reams of economic advisors, the business people. We don't have that kind of information, and yet we were able to see. We said right from the first go that this policy, this economic policy that the President was going to follow, basically prime pumping an economy that was already growing, was going to result in much higher inflation. It's obvious. It was bound to happen. And yet they went ahead and did it. And on the other topic, where you say, that they had support. Again, what they were doing was that they were criticizing the actions of the previous administration. And then they, in a way that created expectations that they would do things much better than the previous administration, when in fact the narrative that they've created about the coup makes that impossible, because they can't control what it does. I'm going to have to use my words very carefully, pick my words extremely carefully. So again, they're forced into all kinds of policies and actions and decisions on this, which are only going to make them less and less popular. And they're using ever more authoritarian responses, ever more, I would say, unlawful responses. And bear in mind, the courts are now coming ever more to that view. And of course, that's going to make them more and more unpopular and lose them support on this issue. So again, they have created these problems for themselves, and it's impossible to see now how they can turn around without doing a catastrophic U-turn, which I would have thought would completely destroy whatever credibility they have left. I agree, 2022 is a lost cause. I don't see how they can turn it round in time to save 2022. And I gather there's been a massive outrush of Democrats from Congress all saying they're going to retire in 2022. And one sense is that they feel that they're going to lose Congress and lose it badly. But what they're going to do in 2024, I agree that's the big issue. At the moment, their only candidate is Biden himself, because Buttigieg has failed. Kamala has failed. Some talk of Michelle, but she's not keen, and it might be a struggle even with her. So the economy is a lost cause. All the other domestic issues are a lost cause. You look for some great foreign policy triumph. Well, you search around for a nice little war. And that seems to me the only thing that they're going to be able to do. A wag the dog type situation. We all remember the film, and I wonder whether something like that might be in the works before very long.
Yeah, my hunch there would be that some nice little war is just going to end up being a boomerang and probably pushes ratings even lower. Real quick, going back to some of the court cases with regards to the mandates and the jabs, I'm going to read you just a quick excerpt from the Ron Paul Institute, because Biden's gotten crushed on those as well. And this is what the Ron Paul Institute says by Daniel McAdams. This week's nationwide annihilation of Biden's federal contractor jab mandate at the hands of Georgia federal judge R. Stan Baker has resulted in a landslide retreat of cowardly mega corporations from their so-confident bullying of American workers. Biden's illegal gamble, the nationwide federal contractor jab mandate, has, like his previous Medicare mandate and OSHA, if you have 100 workers mandatory jab mandate, been ripped to shreds early on in the courts. Biden has pissed off just about everybody. He's pissed them off so bad that even the corporations that decided to go along with his illegal mandates are now dumping him as well, because they're saying this guy is a loser. I mean, he has taken an L on every single issue. And this issue with the mandates really turned people off. It turned a lot of the working class base of the Democrats, if they even have that base anymore, people that were working in companies, they just said, this guy's crazy. The companies now that went along with Biden and trusted the Biden White House are saying, we're out. We're not going to align with this guy anymore either. I mean, it's a train wreck. This guy's a train wreck, whether they're talking about foreign policy or domestic stuff. And this stuff that he was pushing, as we're seeing in the courts, was illegal.
Absolutely. We went into great details on this in various programs which we've done on locals, which you can actually go and follow. And we've discussed this with a very prominent attorney in the US. You can find it all there on locals. Long before these court cases came, we were saying that this is legally based on no ground. I mean, all these decisions that were being made to push for these mandates, that they had massive legal problems underpinning them. And yet again, once more, the administration went ahead and did something that has landed it into trouble. And as you absolutely rightly said, it's had exactly the effect that one might have expected. Not only was this legally dubious, I'm not even going to say legally dubious, I think legally hopeless, but of course it's done exactly what you said. It's antagonized a large part of what's left of the former Democratic Party's working class base, the people who used to vote for the Democrats in the days of FDR and JFK and LBJ, and who still, some of them, believe that the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party their parents and grandparents used to vote for, and is the party that represents them, which of course in reality it doesn't. So they're losing on every conceivable front. They're losing on every front, and it's because of their massive overconfidence in their own position. I come back and I repeat what I've said before, and when we've discussed issues like why they picked Kamala, they were expecting to win a landslide last year. That landslide didn't materialize, and the result is that they committed themselves to all sorts of programs, some of them already very badly misconceived, like the economic policies, but policies that they thought they could push through because they'd have the momentum of a landslide behind them. And of course, that landslide never happened. And they now see or sense that everything is falling apart.
Well, I would say that everything that they've built this entire presidency on, from the candidacy to the vote to the actual presidency, is all fake.
Yeah.
And you can only fake it till you make it for so long. And I think we're seeing with Biden that they couldn't even make it past 1 week. You know, it was the inauguration and Biden's hands reaching out to the world and dear leader moments. And after that first week, it's been an L from beginning to end. And even that inauguration was a losing event. But still, the press tried for a week to prop him up. And even they can't prop him up. He's actually going to the media and begging the media to give them favorable press. What do they do at this point in time, Alexander? What has to happen for the United States to survive this?
Well, indeed. Well, I mean, the first thing to do is that, I mean, and one has to hope that both the courts do their job. I mean, there's always been concerns about this, but, you know, that is an important factor, and we'll see what happens and whether these court decisions are consolidated as this case moves up the chain of courts, and we'll see how that works out. But the other thing is, and this is where the antibodies, the democratic antibodies of the United States are so important, there has to be a vote for a different Congress. And when I say a different Congress, I don't just mean a Republican Congress, I mean a Congress with a different Republican Party from the one that has historically dominated the Republican Party in Congress over the last few decades. In other words, a Republican Party much closer to the grassroots and sentiments of the American people. Now, that happens in 2022. I'm going to say something else. At that point, the scope for this administration to do more damage in the 2 years that's left to it, if it has those 2 years, diminishes rapidly, because then you would have a real Congress, not a sort of cozy Congress controlled by two parties which are actually always in agreement with each other, but a real Congress which would bring this presidency, this runaway presidency, to heel and hold things together. So 2022 is going to be a very important year.
And you're referencing
the
Rhinos,
primaries,
McConnell's, Lindsey Graham's.
absolutely.
People.
The primaries are going to be as important as the actual votes. So it's not just a battle between Republicans and Democrats. It's a battle within the Republican Party itself. If you have people like, Liz Cheney, to name one person, and Senator Murkowski coming sweeping back in, then even if you get a Republican majority, it might not amount to very much. What you need to do is you need to change the Republican Party, and you need then to vote for that Republican Party when the actual midterms come up. It's a long process, but, if there's one country where that could happen, where it might work, it is the United States, because there are primaries, not I understand everywhere, but they do happen, even for House seats. And elections matter. So people need to think about that in the United States, and they need to organize it, because you're absolutely right. This is a runaway train of a presidency. It's failing in everything. And if it starts a war to get itself out of trouble, well, that war on past experience could go hideously wrong. I mean, we've already seen we already have a crisis in Europe, which is getting deeper, and where people are now making comparisons with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We have a possible crisis in the Indo-Pacific region. We have a further possible crisis in the Middle East. If these things aren't handled carefully and well, it's very easy to see how they can all get out of control. And if someone in the White House gets the idea that, in fact, The way out of the the Democratic Party's political differences back home is not to try to de-escalate and diffuse these crises, but to actually exacerbate them so as to create a war. Well, that would be a potential disaster. It would be a catastrophe. It could lead to consequences that are unimaginable. So when you say people have to act and act quickly to save the United States, well, they do. And they save it domestically, protect its international position, and basically secure peace.
Yeah. The fear is that the neocons are that they probably do smell blood in the water already, and they may capitalize on
Absolutely.
Biden's just ineffectiveness.
Absolutely. That is entirely true. Or, I mean, we could have something else. We could have a situation where they engineer a war in Ukraine, use that to impose sanctions. That would bump up the president's poll ratings perhaps for a week. And then, of course, the gas bills follow. I would add, and here we go back, you mentioned Reagan-Carter. Carter tried to do exactly the same thing. I remember 1980 very well. And, people today remember Jimmy Carter as this sort of liberal, well-intentioned president. In fact, he was a very radical president, radical in much the same way as Biden was. And he was also running into major political difficulties. And as the election started to loom over the horizon, he ended up doing much the same things as the ones you've been talking about. I mean, he exacerbated to an extreme degree East-West tensions with the Soviets. He created a major crisis in Afghanistan, which didn't need to be created. He imposed sanctions on the Soviets, which stopped grain sales to the Soviets. Again, there was a massive bump up in his opinion poll ratings. Everybody thought at the start of 1980 that he was, at the start of the election cycle, I think it was 1981 actually, that he was going to win. I remember that, the few months before, and then of course people started to pay the bills. They saw the inflation running out of control, and they voted for Ronald Reagan instead. So it's, we've seen this all happen once before. It didn't work for the Democrats then. I don't expect it would work for the Democrats this time round, but the world is a much more dangerous place today than it was in 1980, 1981.
Yeah, and let's not forget Carter and the hostages, the Iran.
Absolutely. Well, indeed, which he mishandled as well. I mean, that is a much more complicated story, not one I'm going to discuss. I mean, because he wasn't the person. I mean, he played a role in that, but I mean, he wasn't obviously the only actor. I mean, the Iranians were also actors, but he didn't handle it well, and of course because partly I am sure because he was at that time, as I very well remember, looking for ways to create a crisis with the Soviets, and he did over Afghanistan. And in the end, it didn't work for him. I mean, he boycotted the Olympic Games. He engineered a boycott of the Olympic Games in Moscow and all those sort of things. And people were expecting that this was going to, lead to him sweeping back into the White House. It didn't, because the inflation that then began to take off and the fear of international tensions that he created meant that people decided that they wanted somebody who would bring the inflation under control and who would be a much more authoritative figure in international affairs. So they turned to Ronald Reagan instead. It didn't work for him. It won't work for Joe Biden and the Democrats this time round. Won't stop them trying.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. The Duran.locals.com, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, and SuperU is where you will find our videos. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. And I think you have a Good Day mug with you, Alexander.
Of course I do. Absolutely I do. It's now become my favorite mug. And my wife, by the way, is absolutely overjoyed, thrilled with it. In fact, she was so delighted that she made sure that we got two. So she's got one, I've got one, and when we have our coffee, our morning coffee, we click each other and congratulate. We toast each other with our good luck mugs. And by the way, they're beautiful, they're stunning, they're beautifully made. You can see how elegant and handsome they are. They're, dare I say, even better in reality than they appear when you see them, because it doesn't convey how well constructed and beautifully made they are. They're amazing mugs. So my advice to you is to get one, and good day.
Exactly. Start your day off with a positive sentiment. All right. Take care, everybody.